There are stories the ocean keeps, secrets buried in the crushing dark, and mysteries that drift on the surface like ghosts. Of all these legends, one name echoes louder than any other: the Mary Celeste. The legend is one you've likely heard: a ship discovered in the vast emptiness of the Atlantic, sailing perfectly, its sails full. On board, a meal sits warm on the galley table, teacups still steaming. The crew's belongings are all in place. Everything is normal, except for the silence, the deafening absolute silence of a ship with no one aboard. It is the perfect ghost story. But the legend you think you know is wrong. The truth of the Mary Celeste is not about warm meals or steaming tea. The real clues, discovered on those silent, sea-tossed decks, are infinitely stranger, more complex, and more terrifying than any ghost story. The truth is a puzzle of bizarre evidence, a tale of a good captain and his family, and a final, desperate act that led 10 souls to vanish from the face of the earth. Welcome to the Story Vault. December 5th, 1872, the Atlantic Ocean, somewhere between the Azores and the coast of Portugal. Captain David Morehouse of the Canadian brigantine Dei Gratia stood on his deck, peering through a spyglass. Through the lens, he saw another ship. It was moving erratically, its sails set in a way that suggested no one was at the helm. It was, as he later described, a thoroughly nasty-looking vessel. As the Dei Gratia drew closer, a feeling of deep unease settled over the crew. The ship was the Mary Celeste, a vessel they knew. In fact, Captain Morehouse had dined with its captain, a man named Benjamin Briggs, in New York just before they both set sail. They were supposed to be miles apart by now, on different courses. To see her here, drifting like a derelict, was deeply wrong. They hailed the ship, shouted across the waves. The only reply was the snap of canvas in the wind and the groan of the ship's timbers. There was no one on deck. Morehouse ordered his first mate, Oliver Deveau, to lead a boarding party. As their small boat rowed across the choppy water, the silence of the Mary Celeste grew more profound. It wasn't just quiet, it was an empty, hollow silence. When Deveau and his men swung themselves aboard, they stepped into a mystery that would outlive them all. The ship was seaworthy. Her sails were up, though some were damaged. The single lifeboat, a small yawl, was missing, but the ship itself was sound. Down below, the scene was even stranger. In the crew's quarters, oilskin boots and pipes were left behind, as if their owners intended to return at any moment. In the captain's cabin, the logbook lay open, its final entry dated 10 days prior, on November 25th. It noted the ship's position and contained nothing unusual. A child's toys were scattered near a sewing machine, a chilling sign of the family that had been aboard. But here is where the legend separates from the truth. There was no warm meal. There were no steaming teacups. The ship's galley was in order, but the stove was cold. There were provisions for 6 months on board. The crew had not starved. The real clues were more subtle and far more baffling. The ship's chronometer and sextant, the essential navigational tools, were gone. The ship's papers, however, were left behind. The ship's pump had been disassembled, its pieces laid neatly on the deck. And in the cargo hold, a mystery within a mystery. The Mary Celeste was carrying 1,701 barrels of raw industrial alcohol. 9 of these barrels were found empty. The rest were secure. And finally, the most haunting clue of all, a length of rope was found tied to the very back of the ship, its other end frayed and broken, trailing off into the water. 10 people had been on this ship. Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife Sarah, their 2-year-old daughter Sophia, and a crew of 7 seasoned sailors. Now there was nothing. No sign of struggle. No blood, save for a single small stain on the captain's sword that was later dismissed as rust. They had simply ceased to be. The men from the Dei Gratia stood on the silent deck, surrounded by the ghosts of a vanished crew, and knew they had stumbled into something that defied all logic of the sea. To understand the mystery, we have to understand the people at its heart. This was not a cursed ship run by a mutinous crew. Captain Benjamin Briggs was a respected, sober, and devoutly Christian man. He was a teetotaler, known for his fairness and skill. He was the co-owner of the Mary Celeste, and this voyage was a proud moment for him. He was joined by his wife Sarah, an adventurous woman who had accompanied him on many voyages, and their 2-year-old daughter Sophia. To make the captain's cabin more comfortable, they had even brought the family's small organ. The crew was a small, professional one, hand-picked. Albert Richardson, the first mate, was a close friend of Briggs. The rest were experienced German sailors. There was no hint of discord or incompetence among them. On November 7, 1872, the Mary Celeste set sail from New York Harbor, bound for Genoa, Italy. Her cargo was 1,701 barrels of denatured alcohol, a volatile substance intended for fortifying Italian wines. The first few weeks of the voyage were uneventful. Captain Briggs wrote letters home filled with optimism. He spoke of his daughter enjoying the ship and of the fine condition of his vessel. The last entry in the logbook was on the morning of November 25th. At 8 a.m., the ship's position was recorded as being just off the Azores island of Santa Maria. After that, the logbook falls silent. The next 10 days are a complete blank, a black hole in maritime history. What happened between that calm morning entry and the moment the ship was found drifting and empty 400 nautical miles away? The clues left behind don't point to a single violent event. They point to a sudden, calculated, and ultimately fatal decision. The crew of the Mary Celeste did not get taken from their ship. All evidence suggests they left it, willingly. When the Mary Celeste was brought to port in Gibraltar, a court of inquiry was convened. The initial theory was a simple one: foul play. The Attorney General of Gibraltar, a man named Frederick Soliflood, was convinced that the crew of the Dei Gratia had murdered everyone on the Mary Celeste to claim the salvage money. He pointed to the blood stain on the captain's sword. He claimed the damage to the ship's rail was from a struggle. He painted Captain Morehouse and his crew as villains. But the evidence didn't fit. Why would pirates or salvagers leave behind the valuable cargo and the personal belongings of the crew? Why would they sail the ship for hundreds of miles only to abandon their own, perfectly good vessel to sail the captured one? The theory made no sense. The court eventually cleared Morehouse, but the suspicion tarnished his reputation for life. With foul play ruled out, the court was left with an impossible puzzle. Let's examine the pieces as they would have been. Piece number 1. The missing lifeboat. This is the most important clue. The crew and the Briggs family clearly left the ship using the small yawl. They didn't fall overboard, they evacuated. Piece number 2. The missing navigational tools. The captain took the chronometer and sextant. This is critical. You do not take these tools if you're abandoning a ship in a blind panic. You take them if you intend to navigate somewhere. This suggests a planned, albeit rushed evacuation. Piece number 3. The disassembled pump.
This is one of the strangest details. Why would a crew take apart one of their own pumps? Was it malfunctioning? Did they fear taking on water? And yet the ship was found to be remarkably dry, with only a small manageable amount of water in the bilge. Piece number 5. The 9 empty barrels. The cargo was industrial alcohol. While 9 barrels were empty, they were made of a different type of wood than the others, one that was more porous. They hadn't been opened, they had likely leaked. Piece number 6. The frayed rope. A rope trailing from the stern. This suggests a bizarre possibility. Did the crew get into the lifeboat and tow themselves behind the Mary Celeste? This would be a highly unusual and dangerous maneuver. These clues don't point to pirates' mutiny or sea monsters. They point to a crew led by a capable captain, making a specific and unusual choice. They chose to temporarily leave a perfectly seaworthy ship, taking only the most essential tools for navigation. They climbed into a tiny fragile lifeboat in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean and pushed off from their vessel, believing they would be able to return. They were wrong. For over 150 years, the fate of the Mary Celeste has been a playground for speculation. The theories range from the plausible to the paranormal. Some suggested a giant squid or sea monster attacked the ship, pulling the crew into the depths. But this wouldn't explain the missing lifeboat and navigational tools. Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, wrote a famous short story that suggested a mutiny and murder, which cemented the Mary Celeste in popular culture but had no basis in fact. Other theories involve natural phenomena. A rogue wave could have swept the deck, taking everyone with it. But the ship itself showed no signs of such a catastrophic event. A water spout could have caused panic. An undersea earthquake known as a seaquake could have violently shaken the ship, leading the crew to fear it was breaking apart. But one theory, a theory pieced together by modern historians and scientists, fits the strange collection of clues better than any other. It is not a story of monsters or mutiny, it is a story of chemistry, caution, and a single fatal miscalculation. Remember the cargo. 1,701 barrels of denatured alcohol. Remember the 9 empty barrels, the ones that had likely leaked. Imagine the scene in the cargo hold. The barrels are stored in the dark, tightly packed space. As the ship sails from the cold of New York into the warmer waters of the Azores, the change in temperature and pressure causes the alcohol to vaporize. The fumes from the 9 leaking barrels begin to fill the hold. It's an acrid, flammable, and potentially explosive gas. Captain Briggs, who was a man who did not drink, would have been deeply unfamiliar with the properties of alcohol. He might have heard a rumbling sound from the hold, a sound caused by the pressure of the vapor escaping. He opens the hatch to check and is met with a wave of noxious fumes. In his mind, his ship has become a floating bomb. He believes the entire cargo is about to explode, taking him, his family, and his crew with him. He makes a decision, a temporary precautionary evacuation. This explains everything. He orders the lifeboat launched. He grabs his most essential tools, the sextant and chronometer, because he's a professional, and he does not leave his ship without the means to navigate. The crew in a hurry may have disassembled the pump, fearing a spark from its metallic components could ignite the fumes.
They all pile into the small yawl, but Captain Briggs is cautious. He doesn't want to become separated from his valuable ship, so he orders a tow line, perhaps the main halyard rope, to be tied between the lifeboat and the Mary Celeste. They will trail behind the ship at a safe distance, waiting for the perceived danger to pass. They are in the lifeboat, tethered to their ship, bobbing on the waves of the Atlantic. And then, one of two things happens. Either the weather suddenly turns, a squall hits, the wind picks up, and the heavy, unmanned Mary Celeste surges forward. The tow line snaps. In an instant, their larger, safer vessel is sailing away from them, moving faster than they can possibly row. Or, perhaps more plausibly, the ship's sails simply catch a steady wind. Slowly, inexorably, the massive brigantine begins to pull away. The strain on the tow line becomes too great. It frays and breaks. They are left in a tiny boat in the middle of the vast ocean. Their ship, their only hope, sails away over the horizon without them. They have provisions for a day, maybe 2. They have no shelter. They have their navigational tools, but they have nowhere to go. There was no monster. There was no mutiny. There was only a cautious captain, an unusual cargo, a moment of perceived danger, and a single, snapped rope. The crew of the Mary Celeste weren't the victims of a great mystery of the sea. They were the victims of a tragic, mundane accident. The Mary Celeste herself seemed cursed by the event. She was sold and resold, and captains complained she was an unlucky ship. Her final captain deliberately ran her aground on a reef in Haiti in an attempt at insurance fraud. She refused to sink. He had to set her on fire. A sad end for a vessel at the heart of such an enduring mystery. The legend, however, never died. It grew with each telling, embellished with fictional details like warm meals and spectral sailors. It became the template for every ghost ship story that followed. But the truth, stripped of all fiction, is somehow more haunting. It's the story of 10 people, including a little girl, cast adrift by a simple twist of fate. It's a reminder that the ocean doesn't need monsters to be terrifying. Its sheer indifferent emptiness is terror enough. The final image of the Mary Celeste is not of a ghost ship sailing with its spectral crew. The final image is of a tiny forgotten lifeboat battling the immense waves of the Atlantic, watching its only salvation disappear over the curve of the earth.